The thing is, facts matter, don't they? And this is what I have been trying to say when it comes to the immigration debate. And the brilliant Tony Smith, former head of UK Border Force, was able to drill down into the statistics. It's interesting then getting Vince Cable saying, oh, well, you know, all of a sudden net migration has gone right down and people are moaning about it, when before, when it was really high, people moaned about that too. What do they want? And I said, yes, but it depends. Net migration is a sort of meaningless top line. What you have to do is drill down and look at the bigger picture underneath it. And when we've had net migration that's been really high, it's because we've been having a gross figure of about 1 million people coming into the country and then 100,000 people leaving. What we now have is still a gross figure of eye-watering amounts of people coming into the country. I think it's around 800,000, but 600,000 leaving. And among those people leaving are not just people going back from whence they came, but a substantial, unprecedented number of Britons, particularly young Britons, 18 to 35-year-olds, who are the future of this workforce, who have gone to warmer climes, peaceful climes, places that don't tax them as much, places where they might feel like they belong and can have a better life. And so that is a very different picture when you then drill down and you find out that of those people who have come into the country, almost 400,000, so 383,000, so almost half of those have come from non-EU countries, and of those people, only 14% are working. 14. That means 86% of 383,000, and someone out there who's got a better mathematical brain than I might be able to tell me what that number would be, are essentially now dependent upon the state. They're either children or students or dependents who aren't working, so they are not contributors. They're net benefactors. They are essentially more mouths to feed around the table. And so when you're losing workforce and you've got even more people you've got to pop up, then actually that net migration figure, yes, it might have come down, but actually it is even worse. It is even more doom-laden. So this is where facts do matter. But also what matters is perspective on this, because I think Vince Cable's a wonderful man. I respect him incredibly, and I actually really enjoyed having a completely different viewpoint to my own, and someone who just said, it's okay. Actually, as a society, we're becoming more open. Most developed world countries are multi-ethnic. They're multi-religious. That's just the way of the 21st century, and actually a lot of people in the country are quite relaxed about it. And then I said to him, but hold on. What about the polling? What about the rise in populism? What about you listening out there? What about me? I'm not relaxed about it. I'm not relaxed about it one iota. I find it very difficult to sit there, put on the rose-tinted glasses, look at the sweeping civilisational change, all the while underpinned by a deeply unfair budget, which once again is expecting me, who asks for nothing of this state and has worked since the age of 14, to dig a bit deeper, to carry a bit more, to be a bit more generous to people who, quite frankly, don't, in my mind, have a right to ask that of me. Because that is what is going on here. Why does somebody from, I don't know, Somalia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, you name it, where, Nigeria, it's not about where, but why does somebody from another country come here and indirectly, via the form of the prism of the government, say, hey, Alex, you work lots of hours every week, you get on a train, you do a 2-hour door-to-door round commute, you don't have kids, you probably can't afford to have them anyway, you've only just been able to buy a house at the age of 41. Can you help, because I want to live in your country and have babies? Because that is essentially how I feel. And so I don't care if there are people out there who think the toothless, snaggletooth weirdo Zach Polanski is some sort of left-wing hero and that this is the right thing to do. If I hear one more blooming Labour politician say, well, it's the right thing to do, I think I might throw something, because I am fed up with being proselytised to by people who have no moral backbone and then be made to feel bad because I believe that a nation state is almost like an insurance system where people invest in it, they feel part of it, they belong to it, they would fight for it, they contribute to it, and then they all look after one another. That, to me, is actual charity, not saying to some rando from somewhere else, do you want to come, have a house, have some babies? Good old Alex there's going to look after you. Ain't that right, Alex? sorry, I got myself wound up again. The calming presence of Vince Cable has left the building, unfortunately. He was like having Valium. Let's speak now to someone who is like, I don't know what it's going to be like. Which drug of choice is Trevor Kavanagh going to be today? I cannot wait to find out. Here he is, former political editor of The Sun. I have a feeling, Trevor, if you had a sort of spectrum of Vince Cable on one end and Alex Phillips on the other, I might find you down at my side of it.
I did enjoy that, I must say, Alex. It was very enjoyable. And I agree with every word of it. And I think it will be agreed with by 70% of the population. They're absolutely sick of the immigration figures, the welfare figures. I mean, we had a story in The Sun today about all of these young, well, several quoted and photographed young women who were having children. They'd had 2 or 3 already and were planning to have a lot more, even though they weren't working or supporting themselves. And it was going to get them an income from universal credit and child benefit of something like $30,000 a year. Well, I mean, that's the sort of tax that what is now the standard rate or average taxpayer is paying every year to support one single parent. So if you're caught by the Rachel Reeves budget and you're earning around $70,000 a year, which isn't a lot, certainly not in big cities, you'll be paying almost as much as those universal credit single mums who have no intention of working will be living on at your expense.
I mean, this is the thing, actually. If they've got the house and then they're getting this money on top of it, then they've probably got, if they've got 30 grand a year of disposable income, that's about as much as someone on a £100,000 paycheck. It's a ridiculous amount of money to be able to go and freely spend on what you want without having to do anything to qualify having it. But I think the more visceral element to all of this, and I've not been able to fully get an accurate statistic, but what I have done is used AI, doesn't everyone these days, to scour through publicly available statistics to make an estimation of how many families with more than 2 children are British families, are British-born families. And good old Grok, when I asked it to go through census data, ONS figures, etc., said, well, look, everything I've sliced and diced and calculated, it would seem to me that the majority of families who have more than 2 children have at least one foreign-born parent, and estimated that 70% of people with large families actually are not British born and bred, if you will. And without turning this into a racialised question, but a question more about fairness, I think that is the thing that sticks in the craw of many British families more than anything else. The idea that there are people who have no relationship with this country, whose ancestors didn't shed blood, sweat and tears to build it, who have come over here and are now benefiting from being able to have as many children as they would like to have without having to do anything to qualify deserving it.
Yes, and I think that Rachel Reeves has unwittingly, or maybe even deliberately and knowingly, exposed a nerve with the British public on this, because I think this has now become the issue of the day. It represents everything that's wrong with this society economically and socially at the present. The invasion by huge numbers of migrants, many of them illegal, the fact that many of them arrive and many of them have large families and many of whom don't work. I think that all of those people who for decades, in fact forever, as long as I've been covering politics and trade union issues, has infuriated those workers who actually do get up out of bed in the morning early and do a full day's work and return and find that the curtains that were drawn on the house opposite where someone was living on benefits are still drawn because they haven't got out of bed. I mean, that was something that was said to me by a leader of the engineering union 30 years ago. So this is not a new thing, but it suddenly has become a huge thing. And I think, you know, you're looking now at those pictures of people coming across in boats. Well, your point earlier about the rising numbers of immigrants, legal and illegal, while the number of people who leave the country is increasing. So the statistics are completely misleading. It reminds me of Simon Cowell, who's been telling us all about how he's had a blood rinse. So the old blood is flushed out of the system and the new blood is sweeping back in. And this is a sort of representation of what we're seeing to British society.
The difficult and most dangerous part of all of this is we're not allowed to talk about it. And yet, there are certainly some people of certain cultures who have an ideology that they don't belong to a nation, they belong to their own people. Let's call it the Ummah. And that also that they aren't the ones who should be working, that other people should work, and actually they're the people who should profit from it. And I'm not saying that everybody who is of a particular religion holds that mindset, but it is certainly in existence within certain communities. And we're not allowed to talk about that. We have to believe that everybody is pure as the driven snow, whose moral compass is exactly the same as ours, who has all the best intentions in the world, and that therefore, if they're having large families and can't pay for them, it's because of hardship, it's because of bereavement or some unforeseen incident that has smited them down, and that's why, morally, we have to be there to have their backs. And then at the same time, you have a left wing who will point to countries in the developing world where we're seeing so many people come from now, 383,000, and say, well, it's Britain's fault. We colonised those countries and then we invented borders. We came up with land masses and said, oh, look, we're going to call this Kenya. And just randomly and wantonly bundled a load of tribes together who didn't have anything in common. And guess what? They can't get their act together, which is why the country is still in the doldrums economically. And I kind of think to myself, if leftists can say, oh, well, the great sort of invented border experiment of the British colonisers is the reason why these countries are now poor, why on earth do they think the same social experiment is going to work in the UK?
Well, I think you've again touched on a number of nerves here. I mean, I remember vividly that during the period when we were beginning to see the first indications that a very large number of people from Muslim countries were coming to Europe, not just to Britain, that it was deemed, and I remember reading that a Muslim imam had said that it was the duty of migrants to use the welfare state to weaken the economy of the countries, the host countries. Now, that was possibly an extreme comment, but it did happen, and it was said. And I think that we simply do not understand, or will not understand, at least the Labour government refuses to understand, that the British public will not put up with this. And they're unpopular, this government, at the moment already. Very unpopular. And I simply cannot see how this is going to get them off the bottom of the opinion polls. It's a form of suicide. This is like a sort of socialist economic sabotage unit being released on UK PLC with the intention of destroying prosperity and jobs and employment.
What is so fascinating is that you see it, I see it, every single listener right now, I'm certain, will see it. Across the Western world, across Europe, voters are seeing it and saying we need to have radical change and it's got to happen yesterday. But what is quite remarkable is the fact that America sees it, and America really cares, because it's been reported today in the Times that US diplomats have been told to collect data on human rights abuses committed by migrants in host countries. A senior US State Department official said British people had voted for a reform of mass immigration and have been repeatedly let down. The British government in particular, time and time again, we've seen governments say they're going to take action to solve the mass migration crisis, and time again, despite the people continuously voting for a resolution, nothing has really happened. And they're talking about the sexual assaults and aggravated attacks, particularly on women and girls, by people of the migration background, especially an Islamic background. America's looking at Europe and going, blimmin' heck, they're walking themselves to the edge of the cliff and they're going to throw themselves off it. Perhaps we're going to have to step in and do something. I mean, to me, that really does encapsulate quite how precarious the situation we're in.
Well, this is quite a sensational and yet refreshing statement from officials within the White House administration. It is a statement of the bleeding obvious, isn't it? Something that most of the population of this country have been fully aware of. They don't need to be told by America, but they're very grateful probably for it being pointed out. They've been aware of this for the last 20 years. And the child rape gangs that have been proliferating through communities in this country have been operating for most of those 20 years. And the fact of the matter has been known to the authorities, to the council officials, to the police, and to the politicians, particularly Labour politicians. And we have been told to shut up and mind our own business, because any suggestion that this is going on is racist and fascist. And this is the typical knee-jerk reaction of the Labour Party then and now in government today to smear anybody who dares to tell the truth.
I want to ask you about something that's emerged from an interview of Kemi Badenoch with Nick Robinson on his podcast, where talking about the welfare state through the prism of religion. She's quoted St Paul's advice to Timothy in the Bible, love the Bible, best book ever written, saying anyone who does not provide for their relatives and especially for their own household has denied the faith. And Nick Robinson said to her, does she mean that welfare spending was un-Christian? And she said, you can argue that. Now, look, my belief is very simple. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Politics is here, religion's here. But one thing I do get from this, derivates from this, and it's really stuck in my craw over the last few weeks, is I keep hearing Labour politician after Labour politician using this buzz phrase, which is, it's the right thing to do. Oh, we've scrapped the two-child benefits cap. It's the right thing to do. We're going to make sure everyone has workers' rights from day dot, although there's been a U-turn on that. It's the right thing to do. It's this sort of proselytising, neo-religious morality of the left, which, to me, very often flies in the face of the traditional values of this country, which was free will, moral agency and responsibility underpinned by a shared ethic and culture. What do you think of what Kemi Badenoch has had to say?
Well, I think that religion, the best parts of religion, like the Ten Commandments and this quote from I think it was St Paul to Timothy, that you should look after your own family. Basically, there's common sense. I think that they chime with the views of most responsible people and families and so on. But what we are not fully appreciating is the fact that for socialism and for socialists, including this socialist government, families are a threat to the state because they represent a voice that is independent, impartial, and as I say, representing common sense. They don't want people to live on their own resources. They want them to be beholden to the state handouts. These child breakfast clubs may be very welcome, but what it is making families dependent upon the state for fundamental resources like food at the table. And you know, this is allegedly what we're having to deal with because of mass poverty in this country at a time when we are richer than and healthier than at any time in the history of the world. But socialism doesn't believe in that. It believes in manipulating the people. And that's what's happening here. This budget is the manifest proof of that.
Before I let you go, Trevor, I want to ask you about poverty in this country, or what is often called relative poverty. And I think the word relative is key in all of this. Because when I imagine poverty as somebody who's lived in sub-Saharan Africa, I imagine people who really are facing food shortages, who don't have electricity, who don't have clean water, who don't have clothes. And when I think of poverty in the United Kingdom, yes, there might be people saying, how can I feed the family this week? But by and large, I think it's sort of often cast in terms of, well, they can't afford a new television set. Am I being uncharitable here? You know, do we really have a situation in various communities in the United Kingdom where people's lives are at risk because they cannot buy food and they cannot clothe their kids? Or is it more about the fact that they can't afford a holiday and other people can?
Well, it is exactly that, Alex. You put your finger on the point. And if Frank Field, the remarkable Labour MP who died last year, were around today, he was the founder and the leader of the low pay unit, and he was always on the side of working people on low incomes. But he never believed in handouts. He believed in the old proverb about you don't help a person by giving them a meal, you help them by giving them a fishing rod so they can catch fish and feed themselves. So this is the point. Relative poverty means that if the average person has all of the modern conveniences of society, plasma screen, television as a second car, a holiday abroad, and so on, that everybody should be given a chance to have that too. And it isn't right, is it? If you haven't actually earned it, those people who are able to have those facilities have almost invariably worked for them. They've deserved them. They've earned them. They're just the same way as they've earned their pensions and earned their keep. You don't just hand people something for nothing in return for sitting on their backsides at home and taking money off the taxpayers who are actually working.
Oh, Trevor, I always love catching up with you. You are utterly brilliant. It makes me feel like I'm still in the company of sane people on this planet. The brilliant Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of The Sun. Do you know, I was thinking then, my late grandma, Iris, God, she was amazing. She was amazing. In the Second World War, she sewed wings on aeroplanes. She had the loudest laugh. Everyone loved her, but she was a tough old bird. But she worked multiple jobs all her life. You know, she had 2 kids, but she worked, you know, during the daytime and then in the evening, switching from one job to the other just to make sure her family had the bare basics. The bare basics. And you know what? I don't think she even made it to Scotland. She might have gone to Wales at some point, but she never got a holiday. Ever. Maybe one week every year she might be able to go down to Cornwall. But otherwise, she had a house full of laughter, neighbours who loved her. You know, there was always a shepherd's pie on the table. She knew how to make food go a long way. That generation did. And now you've got a lot of people going, oh, I need a smartphone. I can't watch Netflix. I can't afford to pay my subscription. Like, sorry? Like, go make your own entertainment. I mean, I don't get it. It's this relative poverty. That is the word you've got to look out for. Relative poverty. Because really, I'm not saying that there aren't people struggling. Of course there are, OK? Not when I was growing up, we didn't always get to have family holidays, and I spent too much time wearing my brother's clothes. My mum tells me off for saying that. But it's true, Mum. I have the photo evidence. But the thing is this, you know, we had such a happy upbringing. We were brilliantly educated around the dining table. We didn't need private tutors. My mum read books to me every night. You know, we had a strong, coherent family, which is why I managed to get to where I am in life. You don't need all the money in the world to be able to provide a strong and stable family unit. And so this is where you've got to look out for that word relative. Relative to what, exactly?